but it is a podcast highlighting exceptional people. And you recently, you and I've gotten to know each other a little bit better. You bought a mortgage company recently, but you've had this huge history since.
Most of my education has come from doing bad deals. Not every deal I've done has been an A+, and the ones I do where I make a mistake or I do something wrong, that's where I really learn. And so I look at where I am today versus where I started in the business 20 years ago, it's the mistakes I've made. It's doing a deal that was a little too big in August of 2007.
Would go into a little bit of detail on that, will you? Because I think the audience really appreciates hearing. I think people don't understand that you have had huge failures, and how you respond to that, I think, is the story in and of itself.
Yeah. So probably the biggest deal, even today, not today, but biggest deal to that point that I'd done. It was a big land deal I did. In August 2007, the market was still just booming along. There was no end in sight. And then within 30 days, the market was completely dead and the world was upside down. And I had, it was a land deal that I'd bought with a lot of leverage. And so I was writing the bank a check every month, which was incredibly painful. So a lot of lessons learned there. I've never bought land since that date with leverage and you couldn't get me to. It's like
how big of a piece of land was it?
It was I hate to even say how big it was. It's embarrassingly big. But it was more of a ranch deal, so it was we're talking, it was a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I think if you weren't, because I was in it at that time, the real estate side, and I think if you weren't in it, you don't understand how it was going. Yeah. Looking back at that time, I always say I'm grateful that I was only 2 years into real estate, because all the realtor friends I knew that were super successful had started going into the land, because that's where the big money was, the flipping land and things, and they all just lost everything, right? Yeah. And so I always say I'm super grateful that I was still fresh enough that I hadn't quite jumped into that yet.
Yeah, and I was at a point, where if I hadn't been able to figure it out, I would have lost everything. Mm-hmm. And I'd worked a long time to build stuff up, and it was all going to be gone. But kind of just, had to figure it out. There was no other option than to figure it out. And so we spent a year, repositioning it, working on some things, improving it, and was able to, fortunately, just get out with and break even, which was a miracle.
And recently, I know this is something that we've been talking a bit more on. You invested in a new company, a lending company. Tell us a little bit about.
Yes, so about 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, I bought a company, a mortgage company. I saw an opportunity in the Valley. You see a lot of the big lenders, so I have to go through. I don't want to go through their names, but there's some big lenders in the Valley, and then some really small ones. And so we kind of fit in between that. So this company was a direct issuer, so it can sell directly to Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, which is rare. And it services its own loans, and so we kind of we fit a little niche that they didn't have in this market, and then we also and so that allowed us to compete with the small players and compete and win. And against the big players, a lot of those guys have a hard time adapting to new technologies or innovating. And so we are really forward thinking in terms of innovation and technology and adopting as much as we can, as fast as we can. And it's expensive to do that up front, but we think in the long run that's what's going to give us a real competitive advantage. Well, and so we're competing with these guys. I mean, at this point, I think we have a much better process than any of those guys do on our back end. Our rates are better. The service is better. And so we're able to compete with the big players now and win.
Well, being in the industry, I obviously keep a big pulse on it. And one of the things that's impressed me the most what you've done is just the how quickly you've scaled it here locally, at least. How many do you know figures as far as how many loan officers you're working with you guys now?
So we have about 80 loan officers, and as of June of last year, we had 0. So so in terms of a retail loan officer in Utah, so we had an office in California. That's where the company was based. And so we had employees there, not a lot, really only about 5 employees left over from the acquisition. But we've added about 200 employees in Utah, 80 of those loan officers. So it's been really good. We're growing really fast, but at a pace that's allowing us to kind of keep up.